If there's one thing you can count on inside Nero Wolfe's brownstone, it's that the front door only opens under certain strict conditions. A. The bell is rung. B. Fritz checks the clock and the knocker's credentials. And C. Wolfe consents to allow a foreign organism into his domesticated kingdom. So when a woman showed up one rainy Monday afternoon without ringing the bell, without checking in, and without so much as a hello, I knew two things. She was either lost or lying. Probably both. I was at my desk in the front room, thumbing through a circular that promised to deliver 17 pairs of socks for the price of 5. Wolfe was, of course, upstairs tending to the orchids, his sacred 4 to 6 p.m. ritual, which ranks just above breathing in his hierarchy of values. Fritz was in the kitchen dicing red onions with surgical intent, and the door was supposed to be locked, but it wasn't. She didn't slam it or creep in like a cat burglar. She just opened it quietly and stood there in the foyer, her trench coat glistening from the downpour outside, one hand still on the knob, the other cradling a slim leather clutch like it held secrets she wasn't ready to share. She looked 30, maybe 32, the kind of woman whose makeup whispers instead of shouts. She wasn't beautiful in the classic sense, but something about her made you look twice. And if you're me, a third time. "You don't look like a burglar," I said, standing. "I'm not," she replied, "but I didn't want to give you a chance to say no." "You've got the nerve," I said, "but I admire direct routes, especially if they don't come with a gun. Who are you?" She stepped in fully and closed the door. I didn't hear a lock turn, which made me itch a little. She took off her coat slowly, as if deciding mid-week whether to stay or run. "My name is Jill Hardy. I live on Gramercy Row." "Something's wrong, Mr. Goodwin. Something's very wrong." That was interesting. Most people wait until Wolfe's done with his orchids, or at least until I've offered them a chair. Miss Hardy had skipped straight to drama. "Let me guess," I said, motioning her toward the red armchair. "You're here because someone's missing, but the police won't help because there's no body, no blood, and no one rich enough to raise a fuss." Her eyes flickered, sharp and surprised. "Bingo. My roommate," she said. Daisy Hawthorne. She didn't come home last night, and I think someone's pretending she did." Now that was a new one. I didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. I let her talk. "Wolfe says clients always show you the tip before the blade. You just have to wait for the edge." "She has a habit of staying out," Jill continued, "but she always lets me know. A text, a voicemail. This time, nothing. But when I got home last night, our door was unlocked. Her coat was on the hook. Her mug was in the sink. Someone made it look like she came back, but she didn't." I narrowed my eyes. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. And you came here instead of the police?" She hesitated. "Daisy worked for the police. Records division. She left 6 months ago after a disagreement. I don't know the details, but she said not to trust them if anything ever happened. That, I had to admit, was a pretty good hook." "Wait here," I said. "I'll see if the mountain will come to you." I headed upstairs where the mountain in question was misting orchids and pretending the world didn't exist. He looked at me over his glasses like I'd interrupted him mid-pilgrimage. "A woman came uninvited," I said. He grunted. "Then show her out. She says someone disappeared, and someone else made it look like they didn't." That got a twitch out of his eyebrow. Progress. He returned his sprayer to its hook and gave a mild sigh. "Pfui, bring her up." So I did. Jill Hardy climbed the stairs like she was being summoned to meet the Pope if the Pope had a 3-seater desk, a contempt for motion, and an unhealthy dependency on yellow pajamas. When Wolfe finally addressed her, it was with the usual warmth of a glacier. "Miss Hardy," he said, "you have disrupted my house without a warrant. Proceed now with precision." She did. She told the whole story, slowly but without fluff. She and Daisy had lived together for 3 years. Daisy had been acting nervous for the past few weeks, always locking her laptop and screening her calls. She was sure she was being watched. Last night she was to meet Jill for dinner at a cafe near Gramercy Park. She never showed. But someone had entered their apartment afterward. Someone who knew just enough to fake presence, but not enough to do it right. Wolfe leaned back, fingertips together. "You believe your friend is dead?" Jill hesitated. "Number. But I think someone wants me to think she's safe." That was enough for Wolfe. Not to care, mind you, but to begin caring later if the circumstances proved sufficiently irritating or morally pungent. He waved a hand. "Archie will accompany you home. He will observe. He will report. I will decide." "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe," she said. Wolfe closed his eyes. "Spare me the gratitude until I deem it earned." I walked her out and grabbed my coat. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to be simple, and Wolfe never takes simple cases unless, of course, they're not. The cab ride with Jill Hardy was quiet enough that I could hear the rain tapping its fingers on the roof like it was getting impatient with us both. I didn't press her with more questions on the way to Gramercy Row. Some people open up when they're prodded, others when they're left to simmer. She struck me as a simmerer. So I let her be and watched the city go by like a silent film. Her building was a respectable brownstone tucked between two aging apartment towers that leaned in like nosy neighbors. It had one of those wrought iron gates that clicks too loud when it shuts and a stoop that hadn't seen fresh paint in a year or two. The inside was better, with old floors, a narrow hallway, and 3 units. Jill and Daisy shared the second floor. She unlocked the door to their apartment with the kind of careful movements that tell you someone's already been through this once in their head, maybe twice. The door creaked open. She didn't go right away. She just stood there and looked. "Something feels off again?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "It's the coat." She pointed. Sure enough, a tan trench coat hung neatly on the hook by the door. Not dripping, not rumpled. It could have been airlifted from a catalogue photo shoot. Jill walked over and touched it like it might disintegrate. She hated this coat, she said. Wore it twice and swore it made her look like a retired librarian. I took a few slow steps inside. The place smelled like cinnamon and faintly of coffee. The layout was standard fare. Living room to the left, narrow kitchen straight ahead, and 2 bedrooms down the hall. The couch had a single indentation in the middle cushion and a throw blanket folded with suspicious precision. 1 cup sat in the sink, lipstick on the rim. Everything else was too clean. "She was messy?" I asked. "She was human," Jill said. "This feels staged." I took out my notebook, flipped it open, and didn't write anything. Sometimes you get more out of a blank page than scribbles. I walked through the apartment slowly, like I was looking for my own wallet. The kitchen drawers were tidy. The fridge had a half carton of eggs, almond milk, and some takeout boxes with dates scrawled on the lids. Nothing smelled funny. The garbage had been taken out. Either Daisy had a sudden spiritual transformation into a neat freak, or someone had done housekeeping with a motive. In the hallway, Jill pointed to Daisy's bedroom door. It was ajar. "I haven't touched anything in there," she said. I nodded and pushed it open with 2 fingers. It was a room meant for sleeping, not showing off. Small desk, laptop on it closed. Bed made. A single book on the nightstand, The Daughter of Time by Josephine T. That raised 1 eyebrow. A mystery reader. Good taste. "Was this laptop hers?" I asked. "Yes. Password protected." I picked it up gently. No dust underneath. Whoever staged the room hadn't done a deep scrub. Either they didn't think anyone would look, or they didn't have time. Jill stood behind me, arms crossed, weight on 1 foot, watching everything. She had the calm of someone who's used to cleaning up other people's messes and the nerves of someone afraid this one's bigger than she can handle. I turned to her. "Does anyone have access to your apartment besides you 2? Number no key under the mat. No secret lovers. Daisy had rules. She liked to feel safe. I noted the past tense, always a flag when people start shifting their verbs. Any exes? Yours or hers? Jill gave a bitter half-laugh. Mine are mostly scared of me. Hers? Well, there was one. A guy named Trent. They ended ugly. He didn't take it well. I wrote the name this time. Where does Trent live? Brooklyn. Somewhere around Red Hook, I think. I can get you the address. Do that. And did Daisy mention anything about work lately? Old co-workers? Enemies? She didn't say much. Just that someone from the department might have been looking into her. Looking into her how? I don't know. She said she saw someone watching the building. She thought maybe she'd crossed a line at the NYPD. Records can hold many skeletons. That they can. And when someone quits suddenly from a desk job with a police department and claims to be paranoid about being watched, you don't shrug it off. Not in this town. I looked at the laptop again. Do you mind if I take this back to Wolfe? If he can get into it, be my guest. I closed it and slid it into my coat. The place still smelled too clean. Before we left, I checked the windows. All locked, no signs of forced entry. Whoever had been here either had a key or a gift for finesse. Back at the brownstone, the rain had tapered off, but the clouds were still sulking. I stepped inside and handed Fritz the laptop like it was radioactive. For the master's collection, I said. He wrinkled his nose and took it with 2 fingers. Wolfe was waiting in the office. Freshly transplanted from his orchid kingdom, he settled into his chair with all the grace of a man who considered effort a personal insult. I gave him the rundown. Clean apartment, suspicious coat, lipstick mug, locked windows, and one missing roommate with a possible police file worth hiding. When I was done, he opened his eyes slowly and stared at the ceiling like it had personally offended him. I despise cases that lack definition, he said. A woman is missing, and another believes this absence has been obscured. No corpse, no crime, no clarity. There's a man named Trent, I said, an ex-boyfriend with potential for trouble. Potential, Wolfe echoed. Phooey. That word should be outlawed in an investigation. You will find him, speak to him, observe, report. And the laptop? I shall consult Mr. Kramer tomorrow. If the girl's concerns about the department are valid, he will know where to prod. Meanwhile, I shall attempt to divine purpose from this artifice. He waved a finger at the laptop like it had insulted his tomatoes. I left him to his brooding and headed upstairs to run a trace on Trent. Jill had emailed me his last known address. It was something rare, but it beat blind guessing. Downstairs, I heard the faint clink of glass as Wolfe poured himself a beer. When Wolfe drinks before 6, it usually means the wheels are turning or something's really beginning to annoy him. That night, the brownstone was quieter than usual. Fritz made trout meunière, and Wolfe ate half a portion in total silence. Not even a lecture about overcooked food or the decline of American literature. Just a slow, methodical attack on fish with parsley butter and the occasional grumble. I cleaned up, filed notes, and shut things down by 11. But I kept thinking about Daisy's coat, hung just so. The mug, the windows, the fake calm of that little apartment. And Wolfe, for all his fuss, wasn't going to let that go. Not because someone had vanished, but because someone thought they could lie and get away with it inside a mystery, inside a city, and now, inside his house. Tomorrow I'll find Trent. And maybe I'd find out who staged Daisy Hawthorne's life like a museum exhibit. Wolfe already suspected what it meant. Me? I was just waiting for the blade behind the tip. The next morning started with coffee, cloudy skies, and Wolfe announcing from behind the Gazette that he had no intention of tolerating ghost stories inside his house, unless they included tangible phantoms or real estate transactions. That was his way of saying the case still bored him. He just hadn't quite figured out why he was bothering. I'd already called Saul Panzer. He was busy until noon, but agreed to start poking around on Daisy's NYPD record quietly. No trial, no questions, no alarms. Saul could lift fingerprints from a thought if you gave him a minute. In the meantime, I had a date with Trent, the ex-boyfriend who came with warning labels. Jill had coughed up his last known address in Red Hook, a squat brick building near the waterfront that hadn't seen a mop in decades. The hallway smelled like sweat and shellac, and the elevator wheezed like it was dying of regret. I took the stairs. The third-floor door had a faded sticker on it that said, "Art is pain." I knocked. A moment later, the door opened to a man who looked like he was trying out for the role of guy you hope your daughter never dates. Mid-30s, beard grown just enough to be intentional, and eyes that scanned me like he expected either a punch or a lawsuit. Yeah? Trent Murphy? Who's asking? Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. That got a reaction. Not a big one, just enough for his jaw to tighten like he'd bitten down on a memory. Wolfe. The detective guy. The very one. I'm here about Daisy Hawthorne. He blinked once, hard. Then he opened the door a little wider. Is she okay? Is she? I haven't seen her in 2 months. Maybe 3. She made it pretty clear she didn't want to. We ended. Not nicely. Why not nicely? He scratched his chin. Because I wanted to get married and she wanted out of town. She said the department had changed her. She said she didn't trust people anymore, not even me. And now, I haven't heard from her. What's going on? She didn't come home 2 nights ago. Her roommate says the apartment looks staged, like someone tried to make it seem like she came back when she didn't. Trent's face didn't shift. Either he had a killer poker face, or he really didn't know. That's weird, he said, but not surprising. Daisy didn't talk much at the end. She was rattled. She said someone was following her. I thought it was paranoia. Did she ever mention why? Number, but I figured it had to do with her old job. She worked in records, right? NYPD. That's right. He shrugged. Records hold secrets. She said she'd found something she shouldn't have. It straightened me a bit. Like what? No clue. But she was worried. She said she'd written something down just in case anything happened. Where? She didn't say anything. Just that if anything went south, someone would find it. Said it'd speak for her. He looked genuinely uneasy now, like he'd just remembered something that had crawled into the back of his brain and nested there. You think something did happen to her? He asked. We're still figuring that out. I took down his number, gave him the kind of smile that says, don't leave town, and got out. His building hadn't improved in the last 20 minutes. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Saul had dropped off a manila envelope the size of a short novel. It sat on Wolfe's desk like a landmine. Wolfe ignored it for 3 full minutes while he finished polishing off a bowl of braised leeks. Finally, he opened it and began to read. Slowly, carefully, with his usual contempt for anyone who believed paper was merely for printing on. I let him read. The office was quiet except for the hum of the radiator and the faint creak of his chair when he shifted weight 1 ounce at a time. When he was done, he tapped the file once, then turned to me. She was digging. No surprise there. Specifically, he said, into sealed misconduct cases from 5 years ago. Internal affairs, precinct transfers, and early retirements under suspicious terms. So she found rot. Yes. And she requested copies of 3 incident reports that should have been inaccessible. 2 involved Officer Raymond Tuller. 3rd was Lieutenant Willa Ostrand. All from the same precinct, all scrubbed from the official record. Tuller and Ostrand, I repeated. Has she ever contacted them? She tried. Notes indicate she phoned Tuller twice. No record of a response. She met with Ostrand once. The file includes a handwritten log of dates and initials. Who's W.O.? Lieutenant Ostrand. Wolfe confirmed. Now retired. Living in Midtown. I whistled low. So Daisy was hunting something big. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Possibly. Or she thought she was. There was a beat of silence. And now, I added, she's vanished. Yes. And someone cleaned her apartment. Yes. And someone else may be trying to make her disappear for good. He didn't answer. Just closed his eyes for a moment like he was adding a column of figures in his head. Very well, he said. We must speak with Willa Ostrand. You want me to? Number, we shall invite her here. That raised both my eyebrows. She's not a suspect. No, Wolfe said. But she is a link, and the chain is short. He dictated a letter inviting Ostrand to a discreet consultation regarding a former colleague. I made sure it was printed on Wolfe's best cream-colored stationery and delivered via hand courier with a signature, required. Nothing says, I know what I'm doing, like high-end stationery and unnerving specificity. She responded within the hour. She'd be arriving the next day at 2. That gave me time to finish the Trent lead and follow up with Jill. I met her again at a cafe near Union Square. She looked worse, with tired eyes and jittery hands, like she'd slept with one foot out of bed, waiting to run. Have you found anything? She asked. Bits and pieces, I said. Your friend was definitely into something. Her ex says she left clues. Maybe a document, a file. She never mentioned that to me. Any idea where she'd hide something like that? She paused, thinking. She kept a lockbox in the closet. I always figured it was for tax forms or old love letters. You have a key? Number, but I know where it is. I didn't waste time. We walked straight to the apartment. She pulled out a step stool, reached into the back of the top shelf, and pulled out a small metal lockbox, grey, dented, and unassuming. Do you want to pick the lock or ask Wolfe to hum at it until it opens? I'll get it open, I said. Legally, eventually. I took it, and we left the apartment again. Back at the brownstone, I handed it to Wolfe like a birthday present with a bow made of tension. He didn't open it, not yet. He wanted to wait until Ostrand arrived. Timing, after all, was everything. As the day wound down, I filed notes, watched the rain start again, and noticed that Wolfe hadn't complained once about the disruption. No muttered epithets, no gripes about women, police, or ex-boyfriends. He was starting to care. Not about Daisy Hawthorne, per se, but about the logic, the order, the puzzle. And when does Nero Wolfe start to care? That's when the walls start to close in on whoever thought they were smarter than the man in the chair. By 9 the next morning, the sky had cleared just enough to look suspicious. The city had that washed-out gleam it gets after a night of rain, when everything looks cleaner than it really is. In the brownstone, Fritz was poaching eggs and humming Wagner softly enough to avoid detection. Wolfe was still in his orchid room, communing with his beloved blooms like a botanist priest, and I was drinking my second cup of coffee and staring at the lockbox from Daisy's closet like it owed me an explanation. The thing was built like a tin can with delusions of grandeur. A little rust on the corners, a dime store lock, and no key. Wolfe had, of course, forbidden me to force it open, not because he feared breaking it, but because he loathed unstructured meddling. Saul was on his way with tools and a velvet cloth, like a burglar with manners. In the meantime, I had errands. Wolfe wanted the backdrops filled in before Ostrand arrived, which meant tracking down the other name from the files of Officer Raymond Tuller. According to the folder Saul provided, Tuller had resigned under personal circumstances after a use-of-force complaint that never made the eye light of day. The incident had been filed, redacted, reassigned, then quietly buried in a drawer labeled Nobody's Problem Now. The problem was, Raymond Tuller wasn't easy to find. His last known address was a third-floor walk-up in Inwood. I took the subway north, walked 2 blocks past a deli that smelled like burnt oil and lost dreams, and climbed the stairs to 3B. The name on the buzzer was still Tuller, but nobody answered. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Harder. A door across the hall creaked open. A woman in slippers and a bathrobe peeked out, eyeing me like I might be selling either religion or real estate. "He's not here," she said. "Hasn't been in a week. Do you know where he went?" She shook her head. "He left in a rush, bags and all, like something spooked him. That wasn't comforting." "Did he say anything?" She hesitated. Only that he'd made a mistake years ago and it was coming back. Now that was interesting. I gave her a card, thanked her, and walked back down into the buzz of Inwood. If Tuller had vanished, he was either running from someone or something, maybe both. I made a note to feed that to Saul, who had more tricks up his sleeve than a magician on retainer. I called Wolfe from a phone booth near a pizza joint with more pigeons than customers. "He's gone," I said. "Tuller shot Houdini about a week ago. The neighbor says he packed like someone was chasing him." "Pfui," Wolfe muttered on the other end. Disorder disguised as urgency. "Continue." I didn't get a thank you. I didn't expect one. Wolfe didn't thank people for breathing either, but that didn't mean he didn't appreciate air. I got back just as Saul arrived with the lockbox gear, small tools, a quiet smile, and gloves that looked like they'd handled more secrets than the Vatican. He popped the thing in under 3 minutes, gave me a nod, and disappeared without a word. Inside the box are a flash drive, a stack of note cards, and a photograph. The photo was old Daisy and another woman in uniform, standing in front of a precinct sign, both smiling in that too wide way you do when a camera's around. The back was labeled "Me and Willa. Last good day." I brought it to Wolfe, who was back in his chair and already looking at the note cards like they were an insult he intended to forgive only if they proved themselves. Each card had initials, dates, and shorthand notes, all in Daisy's careful block script. Wolfe read them silently while I plugged the flash drive into the office computer. The screen flickered, then bloomed into a folder labeled "Hold for Emergency." Inside are scanned reports, voice memos, and one letter addressed to whom I no longer trust. Wolfe didn't move. His eyes were locked on the screen. I started reading. The reports were internal memos about disciplinary actions that were requested but never filed. One mentioned a cover-up of a civilian injury during a drug bust. Another suggested falsified testimony by Tuller. Daisy had marked them all with questions. Who approved this? Why no follow-up? Where is Ostrand in this? The letter was worse. It was written 3 weeks ago. Daisy said she feared someone had found out she was collecting documents. She referenced seeing the same man twice near her apartment and said she had reason to believe her phone was being cloned. She ended with a line Wolfe repeated aloud. "If this letter is being read, I either ran out of time or courage." We didn't speak for a moment. Wolfe broke the silence first. "She's hiding or worse." "Or someone wants us to think she is," I said. He nodded once, then looked at the clock. It was 1:53 p.m. "She will be here shortly," he said. "Make the arrangements." At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Fritz answered, as always, and led Lieutenant Willa Ostrand, retired, sharp-eyed and dressed in grey, into Wolfe's office with the same decorum he'd use for a head of state or an offended food critic. Ostrand had the look of someone who had once commanded a room full of officers, with just a raised eyebrow and still could. She didn't sit until Wolfe gestured. When she did, she sat like she expected an ambush. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, "I don't know what this is about, but I agreed to come because your letter mentioned Daisy Hawthorne." "She's missing," Wolfe said. Ostrand blinked. "Not a surprise calculation." "When?" 2 days ago. Her roommate is concerned. We're involved. I haven't spoken to Daisy in months. Wolf didn't move. You were close. Once, she looked up to me. Then she got ideas. She started asking questions. Dangerous ones. About the past, mistakes, things better left alone. She left us a file, Wolf said, gesturing to the flash drive. You are in it. That made her jaw clench. She was trying to clean something she didn't understand. And what didn't she understand, Lieutenant? Ostrand leaned back slightly. How far people will go to keep their names clean. Did you help her? Wolf asked. Yes. Once. I gave her a name. Tuller. He has disappeared. Of course he has. Her voice wasn't angry. It was tiring, like she'd lived through this before and barely got out. Do you believe Daisy is in danger? Wolf asked. I believe she was too smart for her own good, Ostrand replied. And too alone. She trusted you. Ostrand's lips tightened. Then I failed her. Wolf nodded. That, Lieutenant, remains to be seen. She left without another word. Wolf sat motionless for nearly a full minute. Then he turned to me. She gave Daisy Tuller's name, and someone made sure Tuller disappeared. Yes, but not just him. Someone cleaned the apartment. Someone erased the footprints. Someone with resources. A cop, or someone who used to be. The puzzle was forming now. Wolf didn't say it, but I could see it. The board was set. The suspects were aligning. And somewhere out there, Daisy Hawthorne was either dead, hiding, or waiting for someone to do the math. Wolf didn't stand. He didn't need to. He just muttered, "Find out who Daisy feared most and find them fast." I grabbed my coat. The legwork wasn't done. Not yet. That evening, the brownstone felt quieter than usual. Wolf was in one of his moods, one of the heavy, contemplative ones that crept in when a case slithered close to home, even if he'd never admit it. Fritz served duck à l'orange and got only a half-hearted grunt in response. Wolf ate in silence, sipped his beer like it might reveal something if he looked hard enough into the foam, and then retreated to the office without a word. I stayed behind for a minute, chewing slowly, not because I wasn't hungry, and I got along just fine, but because something had shifted in the air. It wasn't what Ostrand had said. It was what she hadn't. Her visit had left fingerprints Wolf was still processing. Back in the office, the lockbox sat open on the edge of Wolf's desk, the note cards in a neat stack, and the flash drive back in its envelope. Wolf was staring at a copy of Daisy's letter like it owed him rent. She was methodical, he finally said. Right. Organized. Thoughtful. No, Mr. Goodwin, he said, tone flat. I meant the trespasser. That made me sit up straighter. He gestured toward the photo we'd recovered of Daisy and Ostrand, smiling in uniform. It was now sitting on his blotter under the lamp, illuminated like a relic in a museum. Note the crease, he said. I leaned in. Sure enough, there was a faint bend along the bottom right edge. I hadn't noticed it before. Then again, I hadn't looked at it under a microscope. Someone folded it, I said. Yes, which means someone else handled it before we did. The box was hidden, but it was found and then replaced. You think the apartment was searched more than once? I think it was searched with intent and care. That didn't sit well. The idea that someone else had found Daisy's private stash and then returned it, unbroken, suggested a few things. None of them are friendly. Why put it back? I asked. Because they didn't want us to know they'd found it. Not yet. Now that was a chill down the spine. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. So they've been ahead of us from the start. Temporarily, Wolf said. I didn't respond. I was thinking about the apartment, the coat, the mug, and the pristine order of a life hastily assembled to look lived in. And now the subtle mark of a stranger who hadn't taken but had touched. It was getting worse. Wolfe rang Fritz and asked him to bring the envelope again. While we waited, I checked Saul. He'd been working angles on Tuller's disappearance and had found exactly one lead. A prepaid phone registered in Tuller's name had pinged near a train station in White Plains 3 days ago. Then, nothing. Saul was still digging. He always was. When Fritz returned with the envelope, Wolfe opened it again and handed me the note cards. "Review them aloud," he said. I did, one by one. Each card had names, initials, precinct numbers, shorthand notes, and things like RT cover story, doesn't hold, and OK denied the call. Wolfe didn't interrupt until I reached the 7th card. "That one," he said. It read, "BR says D owes him. Confirms meeting 2 weeks ago. Pushed her to drop it." I looked up. "Who's BR?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "That, Mr. Goodwin, is your next errand." It didn't take long. Jill, when called, confirmed that BR stood for Bradley Regal, Daisy's former supervisor in the records division. Tall, tidy, meticulous, and, according to Jill, always smiling like he knows more than he's letting on. I paid him a visit at his current workplace, a private security firm on the West Side that looked like it sold paranoia to the rich. Regal met me in the lobby, pressed slacks, horn-rimmed glasses, and a handshake like he'd rather be holding a clipboard. "You're with Wolfe?" he said. "I've heard of him. Big man. Bigger reputation." "I'll let him know you're a fan," I said. "I'm here about Daisy Hawthorne." His smile didn't shift. "Unfortunate business. Unfortunate and ongoing. She's missing." I heard. "How?" "Someone mentioned it at the precinct reunion last night. Didn't think you were still close with the department." "I keep up," he said. "Old habits." I gave him a look. "2 weeks ago, you had a conversation with Daisy." She took notes. He raised an eyebrow. "She took notes on everyone." "What did you tell her? That she was wasting her time? That if she kept digging, she'd get burned? That's a hell of a warning." "She came to me in a panic. Said she'd found something that implicated more than one person. She said she wanted to go public. Did she name names?" "Number, but I figured it was about Tuller. Or Ostrand. Or you." He didn't flinch. "No, Mr. Goodwin. I was the only one trying to help her leave it. It was too polished for my taste." "Why did she owe you?" I asked. He tilted his head, a touch of theater. "I said that. She wrote it." He paused. "She owed me honesty. I got her the job. I trained her. When she got into trouble, I pulled strings. And when she started pointing fingers at ghosts, I told her to stop." I nodded slowly. "Where were you 3 nights ago?" His smile returned. "I was at my niece's piano recital in Yonkers. You want to ask her, she'll be thrilled someone finally noticed. I didn't press it. I had what I needed. I thanked him and left, but I didn't like the way he watched me walk out, like he knew he'd just given me enough to chew on, and not one crumb more." Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe in the office, eyes closed, fingertips together. I gave him the rundown. He didn't open his eyes until I mentioned the recital. "A niece," he said, "is a convenient alibi, especially if she adores you. And he's slippery." "Yes, and confident. He knows something. Enough to stage the apartment, or enough to suggest it be staged. That was Wolfe's way of saying someone else might be doing the dirty work." The doorbell rang. Fritz answered and returned moments later with a puzzled expression. "There is a delivery," he said. Small box, no return address. Wolfe frowned. I opened it. Inside a single, folded photograph. Black and white. Slightly curled. It showed Daisy Hawthorne's eyes wide mid-step, walking out of a subway station. She wasn't alone. Next to her, facing slightly away, was Raymond Tuller. Behind them, distant but visible, was Bradley Regal. Wolfe didn't speak. I handed him the photo. He stared at it for a long moment. This was taken 6 days ago, he said. You're sure? Yes. The newspaper stand in the background is carrying this week's Post. So she's alive. She was. And Regal was watching her, or guiding her. He set the photo down carefully. This is no longer a curiosity issue, he said. It is one of deceit. Subtle, deliberate, and escalating. He rang for Fritz. Call Miss Hardy, he said. Ask her to return tomorrow morning. We require clarification. And Tuller. Find him. Or find who wanted him found. The brownstone was no longer just disturbed. It had been trespassed, touched, manipulated. And Wolfe, who loathed few things more than being maneuvered, was beginning to see the whole board. Soon, he'd start moving pieces, and someone out there wouldn't like where they landed. By the time Jill Hardy arrived at the brownstone the next morning, the air outside had that stickiness New York reserves for late spring, warm enough to sweat, but heavy enough to make you regret everything from your wardrobe to your apartment lease. She stepped inside promptly at 9:30, dressed plainly, jaw tight. The look in her eyes told me she hadn't slept much. I offered coffee, which she accepted, and then led her into Wolfe's office like I was guiding someone into a courtroom. Wolfe didn't look up from his chair when we entered. He was gazing at the photograph, the one from the anonymous package, with a kind of dispassionate intensity that could charbroil a lesser man. Jill sat when I gestured, holding the coffee like it might answer a question she didn't want to ask aloud. Wolfe finally broke the silence. You received no messages from Miss Hawthorne last week? Nothing, Jill said. No texts, no emails. I've checked everything. Twice. She never mentioned the name Bradley Regal to you? Jill shook her head, only that she didn't trust the people she worked with. Mr. Regal, Wolfe said, claims he was attempting to protect her from herself, that she owed him honesty. Jill made a face. That's laughable. He made her miserable. She once called him a smiling parasite. I glanced at Wolfe. His eyebrows twitched, not from surprise, but confirmation. She also never mentioned meeting Tuller again? Number, she was afraid of him. He said he had a temper. Wolfe nodded slowly. Then, without ceremony, he handed her the photograph. Jill took it. Her face changed. She stared at it long, not just at Daisy, but at the context, at the blurred movement behind them, at Regal. This was taken recently, she asked. 6 days ago, Wolfe said. Raymond Tuller, Daisy Hawthorne, and Mr. Regal, several steps behind. But she never told me she'd found him again. Because she knew, Wolfe said, that someone might be listening. I saw Jill's hand tighten around the photograph. Wolfe noticed it too. You believe she staged her disappearance? He asked. No, Jill said immediately. But I think maybe she knew she'd have to vanish eventually. This looks like goodbye. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. Or misdirection. Just then, the phone in the front room rang. I stepped out and grabbed it on the second ring. Goodwin, a low voice answered. Familiar. Tense. Archie, it's Saul. What have you got? I found Tuller. I didn't say anything for a second. I could hear Saul light a cigarette on the other end. He's holed up in a short-term rental in Terrytown. Changed his name to Reed Thomas, using a fake ID, been paying cash. You've spoken to him? Yes. He's nervous. He said he'd talk only to Wolfe. Can you get him in? I can try, but we might have to push. I looked back toward the office door. Wolfe wouldn't want Tuller dragged like a sack of potatoes. He'd want him delivered on his own accord, preferably with his composure intact. Tell him Wolfe will protect his statement, that we're not the cops, and that if he doesn't talk now, someone else might make sure he never does. I'll do what I can. I hung up and went back. Wolfe was watching the doorway like he already knew. Tuller's been found, I said. Terrytown. Saul's on it. Wolfe gave one solemn nod. He must speak. His silence endangers Miss Hawthorne and us. I didn't argue. But I had a feeling Saul would need more than diplomacy to get Tuller to part with whatever was rattling around in his conscience. We were interrupted again less than an hour later. Fritz appeared at the door with his eyebrows furrowed deeper than I liked. "There has been a break," he said. "At the Gramercy apartment." Jill stood up so fast her coffee hit the carpet. "What?" "A neighbor called here," Fritz said. She found Miss Hardy's card and remembered the name. "Said the door was open this morning. Police are there now." "I'm going," Jill said. Wolfe raised a hand. "You will not." That froze her halfway to the door. "You will wait here," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin will go." I was already grabbing my coat. "Keep your phone on," Wolfe told me. The ride to Gramercy Row was a straight line through anxiety. I didn't like the timing. Wolfe didn't believe in coincidence, and he drilled that into me long ago. If someone had broken in after the photo, after Tuller was found, it wasn't random. It was pressure. When I arrived, the police were finishing their sweep. One uniformed officer recognized me and waved me in. The door to the apartment was splintered around the lock. Inside, drawers had been pulled out, couch cushions sliced open and closet doors hung crooked. The lockbox was gone. I didn't need a forensics team to tell me what they were after. I asked to speak to the officer in charge, a short, sharp detective named Laura Stein, with a notebook full of questions and a face that said she hated being 2 steps behind. "Looks like a targeted job," she told me. They weren't here for jewelry. Just papers. Files. Do you have any idea what they were looking for? Hypothetically. Sure. A folder, maybe a flash drive. Something personal. Something incriminating. Stein squinted. Like blackmail. Like proof. She didn't ask for more. Maybe she already had her theory. I left my card and got out. On the way back, I called Wolfe. They took the lockbox. His voice came across the line. Calm as granite. Of course they did. You think they've been watching us? They knew we retrieved it, and now they wish to ensure we retrieved nothing useful. They're a step behind, I said. Precisely. Which is why they are now reckless. When I returned, Wolfe was in the office with Jill, who looked visibly shaken, but somehow more resolved. They want her gone, she said. Everything she built, everything she found. They want to bury it all. They already tried, Wolfe said. What they failed to consider is how stubbornly the truth lingers. I sat down and filled in the gaps. Wolfe listened, chin lowered, fingers together like a cathedral of thought. They no longer seek to mask the trespass, he said. They seek to end the trail. And what's our next move? He looked up, eyes narrowed. We compel Mr. Tuller to speak, and we prepare for visitors. Visitors? Yes. If they believe we possess the truth, they will come. In person. That was Wolfe at his most dangerous, not shouting, not sweating, just planning. Setting the chessboard while everyone else thought they were still playing poker. At 6, Fritz served a dinner of lamb medallions and steamed asparagus. Wolfe ate slowly. No grumbles about seasoning. Just that eerie silence again, the silence of a man piecing together a crime from crumbs. At 8, Saul called. Tuller will come, he said. Tomorrow morning. But he wants insurance. He wants your word he won't be handed over. He has it, Wolfe said. And just like that, the board shifted again. Tuller would speak, but somewhere, someone was listening, and Wolfe knew it, so he'd use it. Let them come, he'd said. They would. And when they did, they wouldn't be the ones asking the questions. The next morning arrived with an overcast sky that looked like it had been painted in with a damp sponge. Outside, the city groaned to life. Inside the brownstone, things were already in motion in a pressed suit. Fritz sharpening knives in the kitchen, and Nero Wolfe setting the pieces in place like a man building a trap he didn't want to admit was baited. Raymond Tuller was due at 10. I spent the first hour of the morning rechecking the locks, running through the names again in my notes, and glancing toward the front window every 5 minutes. Wolfe didn't say much. He was reviewing Daisy's documents again. The ones we'd copied from the flash drive before the break-in, pairing them against the timeline he'd been constructing in his head like a carpenter fitting joinery. 3 years ago, he said without looking up, Daisy flagged her first suspicious incident. Internal memo misfiled, I added, and promptly buried. By Regal. Likely. She then cross-referenced Tuller's records, found overlaps with other misconduct reports. Ostrand confirmed her suspicions. She began documenting her own case, and someone noticed. Someone always does. Fritz announced Tuller's arrival with the kind of solemn tone usually reserved for tax collectors and people bearing subpoenas. I walked to the front and opened the door. Raymond Tuller stood there like a man who hadn't slept in a week and hadn't relaxed in 2. He was taller than I expected, in a crumpled navy jacket and eyes that flicked across the street behind me before locking onto my face. "You're Wolfe's man?" "That's me." He stepped in like he expected the floor to give out. I closed the door and led him to the office. Wolfe didn't rise, of course. He merely gestured toward the red chair and waited for Tuller to sit. He did, reluctantly, like it might bite him. "Mr. Tuller," Wolfe said, "you have come seeking protection. Speak, and we will see whether it is warranted." Tuller nodded, rubbed his palms on his knees, and started slowly. "It was Regal," he said. That got Wolfe's full attention, though his body didn't move a centimeter. "He came to me a year ago," Tuller continued. "Said there was a file Daisy had started compiling on precinct misconduct. He wanted to know if I had anything from my time on the force that could connect the dots. I told him no." "But you did," Wolfe said. "Yes, I did. And he knew it. He said it didn't matter, that it was better for everyone if things stayed buried, that no one wanted a scandal. And you believed him." Tuller hesitated. I wanted to, but Daisy was not like others. She was quiet but stubborn. "She called me last month, asked me to meet. She said she was close to putting it all together." "You met her," Wolfe said. "The photograph proves it." "I did. One time. She showed me the flash drive. Said she'd hidden a copy. She didn't tell me where. Said it was safer if I didn't know. And Regal. He was watching her. I warned her. Told her to leave town, go somewhere safe. She didn't listen," I said. "She said it was bigger than her. She said someone had to finish it." Tuller's voice cracked slightly. He looked down at his hands like he didn't trust them anymore. "You know where she is now?" Wolfe asked. "Number, I haven't heard from her since that meeting. I thought maybe she'd skipped town, but then I saw the breaking news, and I figured maybe they didn't find her." "They found her apartment," Wolfe said. "They found the lockbox, but they didn't find the original flash drive. They found us." Tuller swallowed hard. Wolfe sat back, studying him. "You are not complicit," he said finally. "You are complicit." Tuller didn't argue. "I want immunity," he said. "I'll testify if it comes to that. But I want protection." "You'll have it," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin will deliver you to a contact at the district attorney's office, one who does not report to the precinct." I stood, already dialing. Tuller turned to Wolfe. "Why are you helping?" Wolfe didn't blink. "Because lies offend me, and someone has presumed too much within my sphere." 10 minutes later, I escorted Tuller into a cab and sent him off with a folded card in his pocket, bearing the name of a friend 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 of a friend, someone in the DA's office who owed Wolfe a favor and didn't ask questions unless paid to. When I returned, Wolfe was giving Fritz instructions for an early luncheon, That meant one thing. The trap was almost ready. "I presume," I said. "We're not done." "Correct," he replied. "They will come. We must force their hand." "Regal?" "Yes, but not alone." "You expect more?" "I expect the circle to close." He sent me out with a fresh list to contact Jill, ensure she stayed available, call Saul, have him watch the precinct for any internal chatter, and prepare invitations for a final meeting with all involved parties. All suspects. One room. I made the calls. Jill agreed to return the next day. Saul confirmed that word had spread through back channels, Daisy's name had surfaced again, and people were anxious. When I returned, Wolfe was already drafting the summons. Each letter was formal, direct, and signed with Wolfe's full name. Each referred to a matter requiring immediate resolution concerning Daisy Hawthorne. We delivered them via courier, Regal, Ostrand, Jill. And, at Wolfe's instruction, one final recipient is Captain Julian Herrick, head of Daisy's former precinct. A man not previously named, but now suddenly relevant. "It's new," I said. "Why Herrick?" "He approved the redactions," Wolfe said. "According to the files, his signature appears beside each internal suppression order." "Then why didn't Daisy name him?" "She did. She used initials. J.H. I flipped through the note cards again. She had written J.H. Watchful, indirect involved, on one near the bottom. Wolfe pointed. She suspected, but she had no proof. Now we provide it. And the meeting? Tomorrow, noon. Here. All suspects, no alibis. Precisely. Fritz came in with lunch, grilled quail and lentils. Wolfe ate without commentary, which meant he was thinking, not savoring. That evening, I paced the office, rereading notes, scanning Daisy's letter again, and replaying Tuller's words in my head. Wolfe said nothing. He simply listened to the clock tick and the city breathe outside the windows. At 9 o'clock, a message arrived. An anonymous envelope, no return address. Inside a slip of paper, one line written in block print, "You don't know what you're holding." I showed Wolfe. He didn't react. "On the contrary," he said softly, "I know exactly what I'm holding." He picked up the photograph once more and slid it into a folder. Then he reached for the stack of notes Daisy had left one more time. "This ends tomorrow, Mr. Goodwin. Tomorrow we make the move. Number tomorrow, we will end the game." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't frown. But in the air of the brownstone, something shifted again. Final moves had begun. At 11:55 the next morning, the brownstone's front room felt like a boiler ready to blow. Not because of the heat. Fritz had seen to the ventilation hours earlier, but because Wolfe had finally assembled the players, and they were 5 minutes away from learning the rules of a game they didn't know they'd been drafted into. I'd arranged the chairs myself, 5 in a semicircle opposite Wolfe's desk, angled for confrontation, not comfort. Fritz had polished the brass tray and set out water, but no coffee. Wolfe had decreed this was not a social gathering. This was judgment. First to arrive was Jill Hardy. She wore the same serious grey as before, but moved differently. Less unsure, more settled. She gave me a nod and sat without asking. She knew, as I did, that what came next would define everything she'd feared and hoped for. Next was Willa Ostrand. Retired badge, still sharp. She entered with her jaw set, her posture crisp, and the unmistakable scent of a woman braced for her past to be resurrected in full daylight. Third came Regal, all charm and starch. The man had a collar so stiff it could cut fruit and a smile so polished it should have had its own reflection. He greeted no one and offered no explanation for his punctuality. Fourth and last was Captain Julian Herrick. Tall, hollow-cheeked, and clipped in his movements, Herrick looked like a man who hadn't blinked in 5 years. He glanced around the room as if mentally measuring his opposition, then sat where I indicated, precisely on the crease of the cushion. The chair didn't dare creak. At 12 o'clock sharp, Wolfe entered. He moved slowly, as always, not out of fragility, but because Nero Wolfe did not accelerate for anyone, not even gravity. He lowered himself into his chair like it was an extension of his dignity and folded his hands over his stomach. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I've asked you here to resolve the matter of Miss Daisy Hawthorne." A pause. No reaction. She is, as some of you know, missing. As others of you may pretend not to know, she was in possession of documents indicating a systematic effort to conceal misconduct within the 12th precinct of the NYPD. That got a flicker barely from Herrick. Miss Hawthorne did not vanish by accident. She vanished by design, but not her own. Wolfe nodded toward the envelope on his desk. I stepped forward and opened it, removing the photograph of Daisy, Tuller, and Regal. I held it up for all to see. "This was taken 6 days ago," I said. Miss Hawthorne met Officer Raymond Tuller. She was followed. Not covertly, deliberately. "Mr. Regal, you're in the frame." Regal didn't flinch. Coincidence. Wolfe raised an eyebrow, a practiced answer, but unhelpful. He turned his attention to Herrick. "Captain, you are not named explicitly in Miss Hawthorne's notes. However, your initials appear repeatedly in proximity to key decisions, each related to suppression or alteration of internal documentation." Herrick responded coolly. "I followed department procedure." "No," Wolfe said. "You manipulated it." The air in the room changed. Subtly, but it changed. Wolfe continued. "Miss Hawthorne's files contain records of 3 separate misconduct cases. Each is flagged for review, then erased or reassigned under your command. Each involving Mr. Regal or Officer Tuller." Herrick folded his hands. "Those reports were filed incorrectly." Wolfe leaned forward half an inch. For him, a lunge. "You're not on the stand, sir, nor are you being prosecuted yet. But you are implicated." Ostrand spoke for the first time. "I warned her," she said. "I told her it would get her in trouble." Wolfe turned to her. "You were once her mentor. You confirmed one of her suspicions. I gave her a name." "You did. Now she's gone." That landed like a gavel. Regal shifted in his chair. "This is all speculation." "No," Wolfe said. "This is triangulation." He gestured to me. I stepped forward with another envelope, removed the printed letter Daisy had left, and left the one addressed to whom I no longer trust. I read it aloud. It told of doubt, pressure, and betrayal. It mentioned names, initials. It ended with the line Wolfe had repeated before. If this letter is being read, I either ran out of time or courage. I folded it silently. Wolfe looked at Regal. "You are the pressure." Regal bristled. She was unstable. "You are afraid," Wolfe continued, "that she would expose what you had helped hide. Not alone. With Captain Herrick's assistance, you rerouted reports, silenced complaints, and punished dissenters. I did not think Herrick started." "You punished Daisy," Wolfe said, cutting him. "With threats, with surveillance, and ultimately, with disappearance." Now Jill spoke, voice tight but steady. "Is she alive?" Wolfe paused. "I believe so." Everyone stared. "She has not contacted us," Wolfe said. "But the photo, the documents, and the timing of the breaking suggest she staged her absence with the knowledge she was being watched. She wanted you to turn to Regal and Herrick to believe she was gone, that you'd succeeded, but she left enough to ensure someone would follow the thread." "And now what?" Regal asked. "You call the press? The police?" "No," Wolfe said. "A beat. I called you." Another pause. "You will make your own choices now," Wolfe said. "Either come forward or be pulled forward." He turned to Herrick. "I've already sent copies of the files to the DA's office." "And what of Daisy?" Jill asked again. Wolfe looked at her, softer now. "She left a pattern. I trust she will follow it." No one spoke. Not for a long moment. Then Herrick rose. "This conversation is finished." "No," Wolfe said. "This conversation is just beginning, but elsewhere." Herrick turned without another word and left. Regal followed. Ostrand lingered for a breath, then said, "Tell her I'm sorry," and departed too. That left Jill. She looked at Wolfe, then at me, and finally said, "So it's over?" Wolfe answered, "It has begun to end." She nodded once, then stood. "If she contacts me, you will tell her she is not alone," Wolfe said. She gave a tight smile, almost a real one, and left. The door shut. Silence. Wolfe sat back, exhaled, and closed his eyes. "I dislike rooms full of liars," he muttered. "You handled them well." "I did not handle them. I allowed them to expose themselves. The guilty always do." "You think Daisy's alive?" "I do. And if she's not, she will be found." The clock ticked. Fritz appeared with a tray. Wolfe waved him off. The board had cleared. But not cleanly. The next move, Wolfe knew, was Daisy's, and he was ready when she made it. It was a quiet morning, 3 days after the gathering, when Daisy Hawthorne returned. She didn't knock, she didn't call ahead, and she didn't walk in like someone coming home. She walked in like someone reclaiming a place they'd once considered safe, half cautiously, half like she didn't trust herself for doing it. I was at my desk reading Wolfe's notes when the bell rang. Fritz answered, called up the stairs, and then stood in the hallway like he wasn't quite sure if the woman on the stoop was a memory or a problem. I met him there. She looked thinner, paler. Her coat was different denim, frayed at the sleeves, and her eyes had that sunken, faraway glaze that came from living underground too long. "I got word," she said. "Someone told me Wolfe held a meeting. I figured it was time." "Someone?" I asked. "I have a few friends left." I didn't push. Not yet. I gestured her in, and she followed me silently through the front room and into Wolfe's office. He was there already, seated as always, a book unopened in his lap. He looked up, saw her, and gave no outward reaction. But I knew Wolfe. I saw the faint, deliberate blink. For him, that was a standing ovation. "Miss Hawthorne," he said, "you have taken your time." I had to be sure I wasn't walking into a noose. "No," Wolfe said, "you are walking into a reckoning." She sat in the same chair where her former supervisor, her mentor, and the man who had shadowed her last movements had all sat before her. She folded her hands. "They're afraid," she said. "Yes. They think I have more." "You do." Wolfe gestured to the envelope still sitting in his desk drawer, the second flash drive, the one no one had touched since Tuller confessed and Regal was exposed. "Why didn't you run farther?" Wolfe asked. "I did," she said, "but I couldn't keep running. It felt like I'd given up." He nodded once. "Then speak. Tell us what you haven't yet said." She took a breath. Not a deep one. Those were for people not hiding from their own breath. "I started looking into the missing complaints 2 years ago. I saw patterns. People filing misconduct reports that went nowhere. Internal affairs showing interest, then backing off. The same names kept appearing, Tuller, a few others, and always Regal behind the paperwork. And then I found Herrick's approval marks, small, quiet, on forms that should have required full reviews. "You copied them," Wolfe said. "Yes, all of them. I backed them up twice. One on the flash drive I gave to Tuller. Another I hid inside an old phone and left with a friend in New Jersey." "And they know?" I asked. "Number only. I know where it is." "Did they try to find you?" Wolfe asked. "They tried everything. I changed phones twice and wiped all accounts. I still saw people near the old apartment. Plainclothes officers, I think. Or someone hired to look like them. That's when I knew I had to disappear. Let them believe I was gone." "You staged the apartment," Wolfe said. "With help." Jill didn't know. I left the coat and the cup, planted it all. Then I walked out at 3 a.m., wearing a wig and sunglasses. And waited, I said. Yes. I waited to see if anyone would take the bait. And they did. Wolfe leaned back. You took a risk, he said. No more than what they took from me. And what do you intend to do now? I asked. She didn't answer at first. I want them to pay, she said quietly. But I don't want to destroy everything. I'm not out for revenge. I just want the truth to mean something. Wolfe nodded. It already does. He reached for the envelope again and slid it across the desk. We have enough, he said. Your files, your notes, Tuller's testimony, Regal's movements, Herrick's signatures, Ostrand's quiet complicity. The case is built. I've prepared a summary for the DA. She touched the envelope, didn't open it. You didn't have to do this, she said. Any of it. I did not, Wolfe replied. But I chose to. Lies offend me, as do institutions that treat corruption as inconvenience. She stared at him. I always wondered if the stories were true. They are often exaggerated, Wolfe said, but not wholly invented. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Daisy stood. I'll speak to the DA, she said. If they need a witness, I'll do it. But I'm not going back to the department. You shouldn't, Wolfe said. She looked at me. Jill's okay. She is, I said. You scared the hell out of her. Daisy smiled, the first smile that looked like it belonged to her. Good, she said. That means she still cares. I walked her out to the stoop. She paused at the door. They're going to fight this, she said. You know that? Yes. Regal's connected. Herrick's got people. We've got Wolfe, I said. She laughed quietly, dry and almost surprised. That's enough, she said. More than enough. And then she was gone again, but not vanished. This time, she had a direction. When I returned to the office, Wolfe was already drafting a letter to the DA, full of phrases like documentary proof, dereliction of authority, and testimony under assurance of immunity. He looked up once. She will need protection, he said. I'll talk to Saul. And the rest, they'll feel it. He nodded. They already have. That afternoon, Saul confirmed that both Regal and Herrick were suddenly seeking legal counsel. Ostrand had contacted a reporter anonymously, likely to control the narrative before it landed fully. And Jill sent a single-line text. She's back. I knew she would be. Wolfe made no comment. Just finished his letter and handed it to me for delivery. We didn't talk much after that. There was nothing left to say. The lie had run its course, and now the truth was moving. The brownstone was quiet again. Not the tense, waiting kind of quiet we'd lived in for the last several days, but the real thing, the kind of quiet that Wolfe considered sacred and I considered suspicious. No phone calls, no ringing doorbell, no envelopes slipped under the door like threats dressed in polite stationery. Just the murmur of traffic outside, the smell of Fritz's roasted chicken seeping through the hallway, and the faint creak of the radiator waking up for its afternoon shift. We hadn't spoken much since Daisy left. Not because there was nothing to say. There was plenty, but because Wolfe had fallen into one of his post-course rituals of brooding, reading, and drinking his beer with exaggerated purpose. It was his way of digesting the end of a case without acknowledging the mess it left behind. I, on the other hand, was trying to clear the debris. I'd spent the morning checking in with Saul, who confirmed that the DA's office had launched an internal probe into Captain Herrick's conduct. The press hadn't caught wind of it yet, but someone at the department had leaked a memo marked urgent review. Saul said a couple of uniforms were already trying to retire early for medical reasons. Translation: they knew the roof was about to fall and wanted to duck out before the dust settled. Regal, for his part, had retained a lawyer whose name rhymed with shark and billed by the syllable. I wasn't worried. The truth had enough teeth to bite back, especially with Daisy ready to testify. I gave Wolfe the update, standing by the globe in the corner of the office while he thumbed through a book on French culinary theory. He nodded once when I mentioned the investigation, twice when I said Ostrand had refused press interviews, and said nothing at all when I told him Regal had hired counsel. Then he spoke without lifting his eyes from the page. The guilty rarely vanish completely. They burrow. They reappear under different names or titles. But their scent lingers. I sat down across from him. You think they'll walk? Number not all, but some will be allowed to retire. Quietly. That is the price of institutional shame. And Daisy, she's done enough. It wasn't praise exactly, but from Wolfe it bordered on an ovation. He closed the book, placed it on the desk with surgical care, and reached for his beer. The glass was chilled, the pour perfect. Fritz always knew when a case was done. Wolfe took a sip, exhaled softly, and finally met my eyes. Do you believe she wanted justice? I thought about that. About Daisy in the chair, hands clasped, voice low, speaking like someone who still wasn't sure if the world could hear her. I think she wanted the lie to stop being louder than the truth. Wolfe grunted. A noble goal, but exhausting. Yeah, that's why she walked away. He considered that for a long time. You believe she will stay gone? No, I said. But I think she'll stay smart. There's a difference. He seemed satisfied with that. Dinner that night was duck confit over lentils and caramelized shallots. Wolfe devoured it with something nearing satisfaction. He didn't offer commentary, which meant Fritz had done everything right. I savored mine slower, chewing on flavors and loose ends. After dessert, pears in red wine, Wolfe returned to the office with a fresh beer and a deep sigh. I followed. What will you do now? He asked. I blinked. You mean aside from fielding press calls and pretending to ignore DA subpoenas? Yes. Well, I was thinking of asking Jill if she'd like to finally have that dinner. Wolfe didn't react, but I saw the flicker of amusement in the corner of his mouth. You are incorrigible, he said. I'm a professional. That is not mutually exclusive. We sat for a while. The office grew darker as the sun dipped behind the neighboring rooftops. Fritz came in, collected the plates, and disappeared with his usual soundless grace. Outside, someone honked, a dog barked, a siren passed in the distance, growing and fading like a memory. And inside, Wolfe finally broke the quiet. You know what I hate, Archie? Only the abridged version. Insinuation, he said. Conspiracy by suggestion, the idea that corruption must be tolerated because it is inevitable. And yet here we are. No, Wolfe said. We are not tolerating it. We are exposing it. I nodded, piece by piece. It is not justice, perhaps, he added. But it is clear. And clarity, Mr. Goodwin, is often more powerful. We sat in that for a minute. Then I stood, stretched, and walked to the window. The streetlights were on. The air outside had cooled, but it still hummed with life. I turned back to him. Anything else before I go find something illegal to watch on television? He tilted his head. Yes. One thing. Shoot. He folded his hands again, eyes half closed. You should never underestimate the impact of a vanished truth. It always leaves an outline behind, and someone will always fill it. I raised an eyebrow. Is that your version of a bedtime story? It is a warning, Hinaide said. And a prediction. About Daisy? About what comes next? I didn't argue. I just nodded and stepped out into the hallway. The brownstone was still. Fritz had retired for the night. The lights in the hallway dimmed. Somewhere upstairs, the orchids slept in their artificial dawn, oblivious to lies and legal briefs, and Wolfe, behind his desk, in his chair, surrounded by silence and strategy, lifted his beer and sipped once more. The game was over, but the board remained, and Wolfe would be ready, as always, for whoever moved next.